Inside a submarine that has lost its primary oxygen supply, the air becomes lethal within hours. Carbon dioxide builds. Crew members begin losing consciousness. The emergency procedure to save them sounds like a mistake. The crew opens a sealed metal canister, triggers an ignition mechanism, and starts a chemical reaction that burns at 600 degrees Celsius inside a pressurized steel hull, surrounded by nothing but ocean. Fire inside a sealed tube underwater. No ventilation, no exhaust. Every instinct says this will consume the remaining oxygen and kill everyone faster. It does the opposite, and the chemistry behind it should not work the way it does. A burning candle consumes oxygen. Every child learns this. Place a lit candle under a glass jar and it suffocates itself in seconds as the flame depletes the available oxygen and dies. That principle is so fundamental to combustion that the idea of starting a fire to create oxygen inside an enclosed space sounds not just wrong, but suicidal. On a submarine with a failing life support system, where 130 men are sealed inside a steel cylinder 200 meters below the surface with no access to outside air, it is standard procedure. The device is a solid metal cylinder roughly the size of a large thermos. It contains no liquid oxygen, no compressed gas, no mechanical parts. Inside is a tightly packed chemical mixture, primarily sodium chlorate, with iron powder and a small percentage of barium peroxide. The cylinder sits inert on a shelf for years, requiring no maintenance, no refrigeration, no pressure monitoring. When the crew needs oxygen, they load the canister into a sealed steel furnace, trigger an ignition mechanism, and wait. What happens next is the part that contradicts intuition. The iron powder ignites first. Iron, when finely powdered, burns readily in the presence of even small amounts of oxygen. This combustion generates intense heat, reaching approximately 600 degrees Celsius inside the canister. That heat is not the product. It is the trigger. As the temperature climbs, the sodium chlorate surrounding the burning iron begins to decompose thermally. Sodium chlorate is an oxygen-rich compound. Under sustained heat, it breaks apart into sodium chloride, which is ordinary table salt, and free molecular oxygen. The oxygen releases directly into the surrounding atmosphere of the submarine. The critical arithmetic is what makes the system counterintuitive. The iron combustion consumes a small amount of oxygen to generate heat. But the sodium chlorate decomposition releases far more oxygen than the iron consumed. The net result is a substantial oxygen surplus. Up to 94% of the oxygen chemically bound in the sodium chlorate is released during the reaction. 1 kilogram of the mixture produces approximately 6.5 man-hours of breathable oxygen. The canister burns. The air gets richer, not thinner, a fire that creates more oxygen than it uses. This is not a minor backup system. On a diesel-electric submarine of the Cold War era, where electrical power was severely limited during submerged operations and electrolysis systems were either unavailable or insufficient for sustained crew oxygen demand, chlorate candles were often the primary method of oxygen generation while running beneath the surface. A diesel submarine running on battery power underwater cannot spare the electrical load for electrolysis. The candles filled that gap entirely. Nuclear submarines carry electrolysis units that split seawater into hydrogen and oxygen using the reactor's substantial electrical output. But even on nuclear boats, the candles remain aboard as an emergency reserve. When the primary electrolysis system fails, or when power must be diverted to propulsion or weapon systems during a crisis, the candles provide oxygen with no electrical input at all. They require nothing from the submarine's power grid, only a match and a sealed furnace. The furnace is not optional. A chemical reaction at 600 degrees Celsius inside a pressurized hull filled with an increasingly oxygen-enriched atmosphere is an engineering scenario that demands absolute containment. The canister is loaded into a purpose-built steel housing with controlled ventilation that routes the generated oxygen into the submarine's air circulation system, while containing the heat within the furnace walls. The housing prevents direct contact between the glowing canister and any surrounding materials, including the sailors operating it. It also filters the output gas because the decomposition process can produce trace amounts of chlorine and carbon monoxide if the barium peroxide scavenger is insufficient or if the mixture has degraded during storage. Once ignited, the reaction cannot be stopped. There is no valve, no shutoff, no throttle. The process is self-sustaining and the canister burns to completion over 45 to 90 minutes, depending on the model. During that time, the furnace exterior reaches temperatures causing severe burns on contact. The crew cannot accelerate or slow the reaction. They manage oxygen flow by timing how many candles they ignite and at what intervals. If levels rise too fast, they wait. If levels drop, they light another sooner. This is a brute force chemical process dressed in procedural discipline. The chemistry is simple, the margin for error is not, and the margin has been exceeded. More than once, the device designed to save the crew has been the thing that nearly killed them. The furnace that contains a 600-degree reaction inside a sealed steel hull requires one absolute condition to remain safe. The canister must be chemically pure. If it is not, the consequences are immediate and violent. On March 21, 2007, the Royal Navy nuclear submarine HMS Tireless was operating under Arctic ice when an oxygen candle detonated during a routine activation. The explosion killed 2 sailors and injured a third. The investigation concluded that the candle had likely become contaminated with hydraulic oil. Under normal conditions, the sodium chlorate mixture smolders in a controlled, self-sustaining reaction. Introduce a hydrocarbon contaminant and the energy release accelerates beyond the design envelope. The candle does not burn. It explodes. The contamination was not visible. The canister appeared normal. The crew followed standard procedure. The failure was chemical, not procedural, and it was undetectable without laboratory analysis that is not performed on a deployed submarine. This is the central risk of oxygen candles. The reaction operates at the boundary between controlled combustion and explosive decomposition. That boundary depends entirely on chemical purity that cannot be verified in the field. Every candle on every submarine is manufactured to tight specification, sealed at the factory, and stored with the assumption that no contamination will occur between production and the furnace. Any deviation from that assumption, a cracked seal, a storage compartment exposed to hydraulic fluid vapor, condensation introducing trace organic impurities, shifts the reaction from life-saving to lethal with no warning. The risk is not hypothetical outside submarines either. On May 11, 1996, improperly shipped expired oxygen generators caused the crash of ValuJet Flight 592 in the Florida Everglades, killing all 110 people on board. The generators, mislabeled as empty canisters, activated in the cargo hold and ignited surrounding materials. The chemistry was the same sodium chlorate decomposition. The failure mode was the same uncontrolled heat release in an environment that could not contain it. Despite these incidents, chlorate candles remain in active service on submarines worldwide. No alternative matches their combination of advantages for emergency use. Compressed oxygen cylinders are heavy, require pressure regulation, and present a rupture hazard if damaged. Electrolysis systems require substantial electrical power, complex maintenance, and functioning cooling systems. A chlorate candle sits on a shelf for years with zero maintenance, occupies minimal space, requires no electricity, and produces oxygen on demand with nothing more than an ignition mechanism. For an emergency system that must work after everything else has failed, those characteristics are irreplaceable. The numbers support the engineering. 1 kilogram of chlorate candle mixture yields approximately 6.5 man-hours of oxygen. A submarine carrying 50 to 100 kilograms of candles can sustain its crew for days without any other oxygen source. The density of chemically bound oxygen in the solid mixture exceeds what can be stored in compressed gas cylinders of equivalent weight. Storage efficiency, shelf life, and independence from electrical power make the candles the last line of defense in a scenario where every other system has gone dark. In 2011, the USS New Hampshire, a nuclear-powered attack submarine, suffered a failure of its primary oxygen generation system while operating beneath the Arctic ice cap, where surfacing was not an option. The crew activated chlorate candles and sustained breathable atmosphere for the duration of the emergency until repairs were completed. No casualties, no contamination events. The system performed exactly as designed, decades after the technology was first developed, in conditions that permitted no alternative and no margin for failure. The same chemistry operates beyond submarines. Oxygen candles are standard equipment in mine refugee chambers, where trapped miners may wait days for rescue in sealed underground shelters. They serve as emergency oxygen sources on the International Space Station, and where a 1997 candle fire aboard the Russian station Mir produced 14 minutes of heavy smoke before being contained, demonstrating both the system's utility and its volatility in a single incident. Commercial aircraft use a variant of the same sodium chlorate decomposition in the overhead emergency oxygen masks that drop during a sudden cabin depressurization event. When a passenger pulls the mask down, a firing pin ignites the generator. Oxygen flows. The exterior of the generator reaches 260 degrees Celsius. Passengers breathe normally, unaware they are inches from a controlled chemical fire. The engineering principle connects every application. Oxygen can be stored not as a gas under pressure or a cryogenic liquid, but as a stable solid compound that releases breathable gas only when heat is applied. The storage is inert. And the activation is irreversible, the output is fixed, and the process that produces the oxygen is, by every visible measure, a fire. A fire that burns at 600 degrees inside a sealed steel cylinder at the bottom of the ocean, inside an aircraft cabin at 10,000 meters, or inside a mine shaft 300 meters underground. The chemistry is identical in each case. Heat the chlorate, release the oxygen, keep people alive in places where the atmosphere cannot sustain them. The compound changed. The reaction never did.